Let's talk about the low frequency oscillator on the Prophet 6. And of course, I'm talking about this low frequency oscillator as opposed to the secret low frequency oscillator. But this low frequency oscillator is very robust. It's fantastic. So often, low frequency oscillators are just used to add vibrato to the oscillators or to do the filter LFO, and some real opportunities are missed. So Dave Smith has done a fantastic low frequency oscillator here. Let's take a look at it. First, let's activate it with the mod wheel. Okay, I've turned the mod wheel up and there's no change. And why? Because it's my job as player to select what I want to be modulated. Let's select frequency 1. Pretty standard triangle wave modulation of an oscillator. That's awesome. But we have several things that we have lots of things to explore here. First of all, let's talk about frequency. I'm going to make it so it is modulating both frequency 1 and frequency 2, which is pretty standard sound. Okay, the frequency of the low frequency oscillator goes into the audio range. And this is so crucial. So many synthesizers of the past have had low frequency oscillators that stay in the low frequency. And that's great for this sort of modulation. But having the power to go into the audio range means that you can create vastly more complex sounds and do things that have to do with texture and coloring of sound. So we are really lucky. Thank you, Dave Smith, for giving us a low frequency oscillator with audio range, which you didn't even need to because we already have one in oscillator 2. We can use that to do audio range modulation. But, and we will. But this LFO can do it as well. And of course, we have LFO sync, which then allows you to align with the clock so you can time modulations with the arpeggiator and sequencer. Let's listen to some of the waveforms, which are under shape. There's triangle, sawtooth, reverse saw, square, and random. We could have some real fun here. I mean, there are so many things we can do. Okay, so let's turn off frequency 2. Anyway, because you have the ability to route where the LFO is going, and it's so immediate and accessible because the buttons are sitting right here. Modulating one sound and not the other can lead to some really complex effects. Talking about thickening something up, again, you can use the LFO directed to one of the oscillators to cause it to vary in pitch against one of the other oscillators, generating chorusing effects like things like this. You can make a really broad sound as a result of that. But we can modulate more than just the frequency of the oscillators. This button, pulse width 1+2, is our means for generating pulse width modulation in the oscillators. So let's set oscillator 1 to a square wave, and we will set the pulse width in the center to start, and let's listen. Pretty standard pulse width modulation. And of course, changing the pulse width is going to affect how the pulse width modulation sounds. You might remember me talking about this. Because we have a pulse width of both 0 and 100, it's possible for the sound to stop. So if you don't want the sound to stop, you need to put it around 50. Or diminish the amount of modulation. So if you want it way up here in the sort of nasally region, just diminish the amount of modulation until you can hear it not stopping. And one of the great cool things, so often pulse width modulation was thought of as a means to thicken up a single oscillator. We have 2 oscillators. We don't need to thicken any oscillators up, but having pulse width on both oscillators allows for some really diverse, cool chorusing beauty. Here, let's try it. So, yeah, you can there are so many ways to create really rich pad-like sounds with this synthesizer by using the slop, by detuning oscillators, by varying the wave shapes, by low frequency oscillation in various ways, and low frequency oscillation of the pulse width. I mean, there are so many ways to create massive rich sounds with the synthesizer. Let's do something else here. Instead of just using triangle, let's go to random. We can use sample and hold to affect the pulse width. Has a nice rhythm to it. And yes, you can line that rhythm up using the LFO sync to the clock if you're doing some sort of arpeggiated or sequenced thing. And that's really awesome to have pulse width on 2 different oscillators on a polyphonic synth like this. Great, great sound. If you want to, you can direct the LFO to the amp, where the modulation is affecting the overall volume of the sound. Right there we have AM, amplitude modulation. Which is pretty cool, and different waveforms will create different timbre complications. And let's not forget the joy of affecting a filter or 2 different filters with modulation. There's the low pass filter. Let's try the high pass filter. Let's try both. That can get really fun. But as you can see, we have all these different ways to modulate. Let's listen to this good old standby. Yeah, when you've got sample and hold going on, affecting 2 oscillators, a high pass and a low pass, both with resonance going on, you're going to get this gorgeous sound. Whoa, this loud sound. It's so weird for me to keep putting all of these things together and then realizing all of the different things you could be doing at once with all of this fantastic functionality. These sounds are so rich and so nice, and there's so much complexity that's possible. Something we haven't talked about. Let's affect a filter with audio range modulation. Kind of intense. Well, let's back it off. So then you can have that richness that comes with rapidly modulating filter cutoff. But yeah, so your opportunity for modulation gets really, really complex. And let's not forget that we can use this to modulate, for example, oscillator 1 when we have sync engaged. If you ever wondered what an audio range modulated sync effect sounds like, there you go. And this is why the synthesizer is so powerful, because you have a whole bunch of routing options that usually don't exist on analog polyphonics. I haven't even begun to explore. I'm just showing you the basic functionality as it exists. The moment you start to add all of these things together, you're going to get some incredibly diverse sounds. Like, for example, we can have all of this modulation happening at once. I can't even imagine what this cacophony is going to sound like, but let's hear. So in that instance, I'm directing the low frequency oscillator in audio range to everything at once, and then adjusting various functions and seeing how that affects it. And the one thing we haven't talked about is I've been using the mod wheel to activate this. You can also use the initial amount knob to just have it on. So if you don't want to keep turning it on and off with the mod wheel, you can turn it on and off with the initial amount, and it's just on. And then having it on so much with the initial amount, you can increase that with the mod wheel. Let's get something more obvious. Okay, so it's that much with the initial amount. You can add to it using the mod wheel. So that LFO section, in addition to this LFO section and the polymod and the the modulation opportunities are immense.